Well, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Keeping Your Landscape Happy and Healthy webinar hosted by the Roseville Utility Exploration Center. My name is Braden Mitchell, and I'm the Senior Interpretive Services Specialist at the Utility Exploration Center. So for those of you who may not know us, we're a part of our utility departments here in the city of Roseville in California. Now, all of our utilities are municipally owned and operated. Those include our solid waste, stormwater, wastewater, electric, and of course, water. The Utility Exploration Center is a one-of-a-kind environmental learning center focused on bringing visitors information about protecting our natural resources. Our topics include energy efficiency, renewable technology, recycling and waste reduction, and of course, water conservation. We do this through school programs, events. We have a free visitor center. We do workshops and webinars just like this one. Our visitor center is currently open Thursday through Saturday from 10 to 4. So I invite all of you to come down and explore Roseville's utilities with us, because together we can build a sustainable community. Now, before we dive into our topic today, I want to take care of just a couple housekeeping things. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to leave for any reason, you can check our website in about a week and we'll have this recording up for you guys to rewatch. Also, we have the ability for you to ask us questions during the webinar. So on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, where you see that red circle now, there's a little button. You can press that little question button. The side panel will pop out, and at the bottom where you see that red arrow, it'll say ask a question. You click that button and then you can type in whatever question you have at any point during that webinar. We do have a few of our water efficiency staff in the background that will be answering those questions as best they can during that webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your question today, we will be gathering all of the questions that come in, and we'll be creating a frequently asked question sheet that'll be posted on our website. Again, that'll probably take us about a week to sort through all of that, but I'll send out an email reminder when that's up and ready to go. All right, I think that's about it for our housekeeping stuff. So let me introduce you to our main presenter today. So today we have John Shannon. He is the Water Conservation Specialist for the City of Roseville, and he works in our Environmental Utilities Department in the Water Efficiency Division. John oversees our field staff technicians on both the commercial and residential programs that focus on water efficiency here in Roseville. Before working for the city, John formerly worked as a construction inspector too with the City of Folsom, and previously as a park supervisor for about 20 years with El Dorado Hills Community Service District. Now, John got his kind of love and interest in landscaping and water efficiency from a young age, where he spent a lot of time working on family farms and the ag industry. After that, he went through some schooling. John has a water distribution operator too with the State Water Resource Control Board. John also got his Water Efficiency Practitioner Grade 1 certificate. He's a certified irrigation auditor and with the Irrigation Association. And he just continues to kind of grow his knowledge of water efficiency pretty much every day. On the side, and this is actually kind of cool, I've heard him play before, he's pretty good. John is a musician, loves playing guitar and bass, loves traveling with his wife and dogs. And I need to find out more about this, but he loves sharing some of strawberries from his own strawberry patches in his garden. So John, I'm going to have to hit you up for some of those because that sounds really good, especially this time of year. But I think that's about it. I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over for you, John. So, John, are you ready to take it away?
I am. Thank you, Braden, and thank you for being here today. Quite an interesting day today, and Braden, yeah, we'll definitely have to get you some strawberries so you can make some strawberry scones for everybody. So our garden patch is quite large. My wife and I thoroughly enjoy gardening. So with that, again, welcome everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about today keeping up your landscape and how to make it happy. There's a bunch of components and varieties of things we'll discuss in this. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the governor's mandate. Just quickly, not mandate, the executive order that was sent out by the governor regarding the drought. Unfortunately, we are heading into that time is a cyclical season again of lack of water. So what we're asking in other regional water agencies, we'll be asking similar requests of a voluntary 10% reduction in water. This includes the city, this includes the parks, this includes everybody. So we're all in this together, and hopefully we can all get to a point where we can help secure Folsom Lake for the fall and winter months, and we can get some wonderful rain in the wintertime and then get out of it. But we'll see how that goes. So we appreciate your assistance, and please feel free to call us at 774-5761 if you guys have any questions about our programs and or our free services that will help you institute any savings in your house. So enough said about that. Let's go to the next slide, please. So why are we here? We're going to talk about maintaining our landscapes. We're going to learn a little bit about water management. Obviously, we're conservation. We're concerned about that. How we can save water, which will equate to saving money on your bills. And we're going to talk a little about irrigation repair, which is an interesting subject because a lot of people want to do it, and you can do it by yourself. And we're going to show you some tips and trade tips of the trade, how you can do this. Next slide. So first of all, we're going to talk about plants. What are some of the things that makes plants in your landscape unhappy? You can see the pictures here. There's a great adage here about getting the right plant in the right place. So obviously here we're looking at some hedge that's grown off that curb there. And that's just not a good place for that plant, first of all. It's a traffic hazard. And then second of all, the heat and everything coming off that asphalt really is not doing too much for this plant, but it could hurt other plants that are sensitive to heat. If we look at the center picture there, we're looking at some turf there that is probably underwatered. Usually not most of the cases, usually overwatered, but in this case, it's a little bit underwater, probably could use some food. A little bit of nitrogen, would help that. And we'll talk a little bit about fertilizers later and what we use or recommend for keeping your plants healthy. The bottom picture there it's kind of small, but the plant on the right was actually a picture I took here in Roseville where the neighbor loved to water her backyard, and obviously it flowed over to the other neighbor's property and did some damage to the Rhaphileptis plants that were there. So these are good examples of plant factors that are influenced by environmental conditions that we should consider. Mainly when you're installing a system or you're going to go make a plan to get installation on your property, you want to make sure you have a plan of attack, and you want to make sure you look at the soil type. We talked a lot about soil type, Justin did in the last class, but we're not going to touch too much on soil, but soil is a very, very critical component of any plant health. So in this case, the root zones are going to be impacted by overwatering and underwatering, but you also want to make sure that we have a good, healthy clay loam soil in there, and you could add some nutrients as well to help that prosper and your plants grow. But have a plan of attack. Know kind of the hydro zones. If you have a shady area, you have a super sunny area, all those are going to require different plants in those areas, and you set them up in zones called hydro zones, and you water to that plant factor. You don't want to mix high water, low water, and medium water use plants all together and then try to water them, because which one are you going to kill first? So next slide, please. Again, more on the trees for right plant, right place. It's not a one-time event. When you go to make a plan for your landscape, or maybe you've inherited a property that have these landscape and someone didn't put the right plant in, it may need to modify that and say, you know what, this is just not going to work. It's going to either grow up in the power lines, or I have a 6-foot side yard and they planted a big conifer or something. It probably needs to be removed and replaced with something that's going to be more appropriate. Know what your plants require as far as nutrients, but also watering. And we talked about the hydrozoning. That's a very key. Your trees should be all on one zone, if possible. Your shrubs should be on one zone based on their plant water needs. Ground cover should be on a zone. You should have separate zones for each of these hydro zones if possible. Use gardening books, internet. There's a lot of great channels out there. UC Master Gardener, UC Davis Master Gardener program, excellent people, have great information for you there. And also talk to the nursery professionals at local nurseries. So there's some more examples of wrong place, wrong plant. So look at the house on the left up top. Obviously those are very large. Couple reasons there: fire, safety, with burglary, stuff like that. You don't want stuff like that. It's just the wrong plant. Pruning trees to the right there, that could be mulberry or something like that, maybe an elm, I don't know. But you don't want to have to do that. That's just going to promote disease, and you're going to be taking that tree out eventually. To the right there, obviously plants have grown into the safety issue there because they've grown into the encroachment of the sidewalk there. On the bottom left, obviously we have fire issues, and on the right we have root issues from a tree that's basically taking over the parking lot there. So for us, that's a liability. Obviously, we wouldn't probably allow that to continue, but make sure when you're planning out your process, you have these things in mind. Next. So what are we going to use to feed our plants? All right. So we're recommending organic plant food. So we have we have a process where we're going to try to get away from synthetic products, synthetic chemicals, get away from the things that are getting nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium into our creek beds and everywhere else. So we want to make sure that we're using organic stuff, not just with plant foods, but within pesticides. We want to have a good IPM program, integrated pest management program, where we're manually picking off pests. We're using less toxic products, safer products that we're using on our plants. I've been using a lot of kelp for foliar feeding, liquid kelp on my tomatoes. I grow a variety of heirloom tomatoes. It's one of my hobbies. Kelp's really working great, just turning things really nice and green and making them grow real good. Composting teas, wonderful. If you could do that, use worm castings as well. You can use and aerate it and get a nice bucket full of this liquid gold, basically is what it is. Good stuff to put on your plants. Next slide. The synthetic fertilizers actually do a good job of feeding the plant. It just does not help feed the soil. So you can actually take the organic fertilizers, and some of them have compost in them. Some of them will help the soil nutrients. And actually the microorganisms will help decompose all this stuff inside the soil and make your soil a little more functionable. Again, compost teas, kelp, and other foliar products you can apply to your plants are beneficial to the health of them. Not just vegetables, but I've been using them on my wife's indoor plants as well. Everything looks pretty good. So next slide, please. As far as I think everybody knows kind of what fertilizers are in general, we have the macronutrients, which are the NPK, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. Those are your macronutrients, and nitrogen's obviously for giving plant color and growth, phosphorus for fruit and flowers, and the potassium for strong roots. So depending on where the plant is in its stage of life, you want to kind of vary up these numbers so you get the best best for the plant, how it's going to grow. With that, though, there's some cases where soil could be lacking some other things, like the micronutrients, which are your irons, your manganese, your boron, your copper, and your molybdenum, if that's the right way to pronounce that. Sorry. But those are factors too that you should probably get a soils test if you're going to be planting a large landscape. That's part of your plan, is to make sure that you are going into this plan knowing where you're going to plant and what kind of the soil is going to be. So I'd recommend that you get a soil sample kit and send it off so you know kind of what you're going to need to add to the soil if you are going to be planting. Next. So when we talk about plant health, my technicians see a lot of this out in the field. 60% of water use at a home is typically used outside. And I can literally say that most of the time we see plants that are way overwatered. We see programming that is constantly 5 to 6, sometimes 7 days a week. Plants need air and oxygen just as much as they need water. So if you think about watering, we do not want to continually just drench and drench and drench. That soil needs to dry out in between waterings. So we recommend that you use an irrigation scheduler for your specific area or zone. There's a couple that are online you could check out. We have an irrigation scheduler on the website of our website there, and then we also have a landscape budget calculator that we'll be talking about in a little bit here. We obviously want to try to water with the weather cycle. Unfortunately, what we see is people who take and they just have the same program year after year. They turn it on in April or May, and then they shut it off in November, December. There is a lot of opportunity in between those shoulder months, which we call spring and fall, to adjust those timers manually to keep your water levels at a rate to where it's more comparable to what the weather's doing and what the plants are actually requiring. Next slide. So how often do we water? So here's the schedule we put together, and we have the different seasons on here. It's runtime per minutes per week, so you can split them up. And I'm gonna call myself out here. There is one error on here in May. So on the drip system over here, it should be 80 minutes, and the minutes per cycle should be 20 times 2. So error, it's being corrected. It's in print right now, so my apologies. But so we had this schedule for winter, spring, summer, and fall. It's based on the plant, the plant factor that's good for this area, but also the weather in this area, and kind of a general guide. Each of your houses are going to be a little bit different depending on where you live, so you probably want to look at your ET factor. We'll talk a little bit about evapotranspiration later, or your plant factors, and up the water or down the water depending on what kind of plants you have if they're low water use. So how long do you water? Take a look at the schedule. What about slopes? We have a bunch of slopes here in Roseville. We recommend that you cycle soak, which means you start it, maybe at 1 in the morning, you run it for 2 or 3 minutes, then it comes back on again at 2 in the morning, 2 or 3 minutes, 3 in the morning, 2 or 3 minutes. You can get away with doing that, 3 times a night, 2 or 3 minutes, and do that, 4 times a week for your turf, and you will have the most luscious turf. You also have the ability to have water stay on your property, so it's not going to run off. We really don't like to see all that water running off to the storm drain systems, because no matter what you have on your lawn, there's good potential that that water can carry down into storm drains and have some of the nitrogen, fertilizers and stuff, pyrethrins, pesticides, stuff like that go down into the storm drain. So that's part of our program. Our program is trying to save water or use it more efficiently, but also we're concerned about the environment. So can we set your timer? We can show you how to set your timer. We haven't been setting timers for a little bit, but that's not to mean that I can't show you how to set your timer, and we can get it set up, and then all you have to do is manually adjust the seasons on it. It's very simple. Next. So this is what I'm talking about. Plants will take the water in through the soil, through their leaves, the stomates, and all that stuff. And what they're going to do is transpire some of that water out of themselves each day. A little portion of that's going to go away. It's also going to evaporate out of the soil. So what we have are ways to seasonally adjust these. 3 different ways I put on here. You can do it manually, up on the top right up there. On every timer, there's a seasonal adjustment. It may say seasonal adjust, or it may say percentage or something like that. All you need to do there is know that if I'm at, in February or March, I'm probably going to be at about 20% of what that, plant needs for water. Very simple. Button, boom, 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 down to 20%. And then when I start up, it gets hotter. I'm in May. Oh, May, I'm going to go up to 60% or 50%. Up button, boom, 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 boom. There you go. Now you're in July. Let's go all the way to 100%. All right. So that's how you do it manually on your timer after you get a good base program in there. A good base program is not going to be 6 or 7 days a week. Your turf is going to be watered, 4 or 5 days a week max. All right. With multiple cycle starts. Your shrubs are going to be watered no more than 1 or 2 days a week. 5-10 minutes for sprays, depending on if the slope or runoff. You may have to split that up a little bit. Your drips, every few days for longer. If you got 1 gallon emitters, you're going to get that soaked in 1 day. You're going to have to leave that on for an hour because it's a 1 gallon emitter dropping water at a rate of 1 gallon per hour. So to get a whole gallon of water, it's going to be on for an hour. So if that makes sense. The other way you could do it is you have a site sensor, rain sensors, or a solar sink, or some sort of climate logic control on your fence or on your roof that communicates to your timer, and it will also take the adjustments up and down for you automatically. And probably the best way and the easiest way is to get a smart timer that's compatible with Wi-Fi. We help you set it up, and basically what it does is it kind of takes over your irrigation after we get that good base schedule in there. It'll take it up and down. It'll tell it when it rains. It'll shut it off automatically. The great thing about these guys is you can also use them as a remote control. You can walk out in your yard and boom, 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 and you can use it as a road. So you don't have to walk back and forth to your timer all the time just to check your system. So it's really cool. Next. How many inches of water annually per plant type? Plant types. Okay, we have different factors. Each plant comes from a different area, right? Obviously, the spectrum, cactus to what's the most used water using plant? Willow. Let's just say weeping willow tree or something like that. Each plant has a plant factor that's going to be medium, low, high, somewhere in that area. All right. So know what plants you're putting in the ground and know what kind of a system you're going to need to design to get that water to that plant without either overwatering or underwatering it. Next. This is a hydrozone. So when you're designing plans, this comes on a landscape plan here. You could take a look at all the separate irrigation zones. I keep saying irrigation zones. Some people call them stations. So on a timer, you have an irrigation timer right here, right? So each one of these has a wire that goes to it, and basically that is called a zone or a station. The zone or a station gets wired to this valve here through the solenoid, and basically it's going to turn on, and it's kind of like either a thermostat or alarm clock. It's going to kick on this valve, which is going to water that zone or station. Those zones or stations should be like type of plants based on their water liking capability, or what we call their plant factor. All right, high, low, medium water use plants. Next slide. High water use, we're looking at these gorgeous flowers, these hydrangeas, these birch trees. Next. Medium water use, some berberis, some lolipetellum, some boxwood, something like that. Look at these plants. These are plants that don't like to be overwatered, but can tolerate some drier conditions. You don't have to water them all that frequently. Although if you look, there's some cannas back in there, and a lot of times you're dealt with the cards you got, basically, right? You buy a house and you're kind of stuck with that. So you can go in and retrofit your spray zones to drip, and you can add emitters per the plants based on their water needs. And you may have a plant that takes a ½ gallon per hour emitter next to a plant that may need more of a 2 gallon per hour emitter. Or maybe they threw a redwood in there, and now you're going to put 2 or 3 2 gallons or 4 gallon per hour emitters on there. So there's some retrofit ideas that you can do out there. We're going to have some more classes on retrofits and stuff, but that's not this class today, but stay tuned. Next slide. Low water use plants here. We got, some lantana, it looks like a redbud, and That Dusty Miller, I think. Anyways, those are very low. You don't have to water those more than once or twice a week on a drip system or on a spray system. They just don't need all that water. Next. Where do I find this stuff? Where do I find this, plant use or water factors for these? Well, we go to WUCLS. WUCLS 4 is out. It's Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. You go in and you type in the plant name, search for a city, find the area where you're at, and it'll pull up these plants and tell you kind of where they're at for that climate and what they need for watering. Also, the plant tags, at the stores, they're okay. They're going to tell you full sun, low water, blah, blah, blah. But the WUCLS is going to give you much more information on that. Next. So how do plants take this water up? It's through capillary action. So basically water is absorbed through the roots. It goes up through the phloem, the xylem, and kind of goes up and down the tree. That's why we get a lot of tree issues in summertime, and wintertime because of the winds and stuff. But in the summertime, it's taking as much water and stuff out of the soil up to the trees, and that's why we have limb breakage and catastrophic things happen in the summer times with big, large trees, because they've getting weakened over the summer, and now they've taken all this water up into the plants to evaporate it out their leaves, and those branches get super heavy and then they fail. So that's a good point on capillary action and how water gets transferred up through the whole mass of the tree. Next. How much water is that? We always get that question. Well, how much do I use? How much is this sprinkler putting out? We like to compare things with gallons because most people bill on a cubic foot. Your bill is probably in Roseville is cubic foot, 100 cubic foot increments, which is 748 gallons or 7.48 gallons per cubic foot. So what we have here is a garden hose. A garden hose, can put out 5 to 7 gallons per minute. You have an emitter here that's putting out 1 gallon, per hour. Basically, you're going to have, it says 1 gallon per minute bubbler and then 1 gallon per hour emitter. So it's going to take a full hour to fill that gallon up with that emitter. Now, that doesn't mean we want to oversize these emitters just because we want more water. You need to know the factor of what your plant wants. And maybe it is a redwood. Maybe you do want a 4 gallon, per hour or something on there in multiple spots around that tree. Bubblers are great. They put out a lot of water, so you don't need to turn that on for 15 minutes. You're going to be putting out, 1 gallon per minute there. Plants, unless you're growing a whole host of hydrangeas and ferns and, willow trees in your backyard, then be cognizant of how many minutes you're putting on that timer. Next. Drip systems are a great way to go. We see a lot of this retrofit, and it's really the way to go. The new tech line that's out there, you have built-in emitters. You don't have to have the spaghetti tubing and all the connectors and all that stuff anymore. You can build these grids very simple. There's spacing differences on this drip from 6 to 12 to 24 inches. Just know kind of what you're putting out. For Roseville here, we don't really recommend anything over than a 0.6 gallon per hour. Just because it doesn't go into the soil that fast. And we are seeing areas that have these tight grids where you can see these hoses here are ran. Well, in commercial applications, they actually probably run another one in between all these, and they run the highest amount they can at a 0.9 per gallon per hour. And then you put them tight, stacked together. And now we're using just about as much water as a spray system. So what is the point? If you're overwatering, you're overwatering with one system, you're overwatering with the other. So be cognizant that, you have a certain amount of flow that is going through your system, and the plant can only absorb so much, and you don't want runoff. Even with drip, you can have that case. So next. For spray heads, you have what we call distribution uniformity. This is all I'm saying with this is you want to have head-to-head coverage if possible. There are new technology heads out there that or nozzles that help you get to that and achieve that. We won't talk about too much of those today, but Rainbird, Hunter, Toro all makes similar heads that are rotating nozzles that shoot one short, one medium, and one long and rotate instead of having a fixed spray. Very good idea to convert your front yard or backyard to those. It'll help limit the amount of water that gets put out, but it gives you a better uniformity of what's being put out. Next. Signs you're overwatering your plants. Next. Overwater is saturation. Simple. You have yellowing of plants. You have plants that look like this to the left there with that what is that, juniper probably, or blue star creeper, something like that. So what happens, we get these clay soils, and guys, I see it. We do the water efficient landscape ordinance inspections out in the West Park and all the areas around here. These developers are really just carving bowls out there, and some of the soil is so bad that if you're overwatering to the point where you have this thing just filled with water, those plants will die. So take a good look. Use a screwdriver. Use a moisture meter. We have a house call service. We can bring you one of these. We have tons of these. We have moisture meters that'll give you an idea of where you're at within that range that you need to be in to keep your plants healthy. Next. Not only that, the water issue and having too much water in your plants, root rot, Phytophthora, fungus, Fusarium, that whole pathogen of fungi can really be a factor with plants that are stressed out with overwatering. So basically you're drowning your plants to the point where there's no oxygen, they can't breathe, and you just suffocate them out. So you can tell the two different plant sizes here, one's semi-healthy, and then the other one's been overwatered. The root zones haven't grown. There's probably some disease or other factors in there as well because of the overwatering. Next. All right, let's jump into some irrigation repair. This is a key factor of keeping your plants healthy and happy. The majority of the issues I see with landscape problems are irrigation related. People who don't go out and do a system check regularly are more subject to have issues like this, because we put these on early morning. Nobody's out there unless, Gladys is out there walking her dog at, 6 in the morning. She'll probably let you know, but, maybe that's not always the case. So it's a good idea to check your system frequently. With all due respect, a lot of the gardeners are mow, blow, and go. They don't do this service well. I would suggest that you hire somebody who knows very good irrigation techniques, and they can help you with water savings and repairs. So just a couple examples here. We have, a broken head on the left. In the middle, we have a tilted head. And this all rolls back to that distribution uniformity. If we don't have these heads that are straight up and down, or we have breaks in the system, or we have clogged nozzles, anything like that is going to affect the distribution of that water and what the precipitation rate that it goes into the soil. So if we don't have a good uniform system being thrown out of these orifices, of these heads or what have you, you're going to have brown spots, or you're going to have dead spots or dead plants, anything like that of the sort. So we're going to jump into a few of these a little bit closer. Next. Cleaning the nozzle and the screen. All right, Braden, you can go. Let's take a look at this before we go full screen, but we're going to go full screen on this one. So basically you have a sprinkler head, and these sprinkler heads have a nozzle at the top. And we'll talk a little bit about, the whole body of the sprinkler. Sorry if this is a little bit, over for some of the people who already know this, but we're just going to touch on this real briefly. So let's go full screen. All right, we there? Cool. All right, so here's what we have. We have let me step back here. We have a sprinkler head. And if you can see this, this is where it comes from the pipe on the bottom here, and it screws in. These threads are 1/2 inch, and they screw in to this here, all right? From here, sometimes there's a check valve in here. We love check valves, by the way. Everybody should have check valves and pressure reduction. That'll be on the test later. So if you can do a check valve there, that'd be awesome. It has a spring, and that spring helps this pop up when the water kicks on. okay? Sometimes, most of the time, it'll be, it'll have a screen in here. Screens are important, guys. Leave the screens in. Don't take them out thinking you're gonna get more water. You need the screens because stuff does get through the system and will plug up your nozzles. Then we have this nozzle here on top, okay? So if we were to take this nozzle off because it's plugged, take a look at that picture on the right when we go back to live. We're not going back there yet, but when we get on the right, it looks like a V in the nozzle there. Sorry about that. What we're gonna do, a good tip, what I like to do, turn your system on. If you see that the spray pan is kind of blocked, take a screwdriver, tap, like that. Sometimes that'll get that piece of dirt, that earwig, or whatever's crawled up in there to blow out. Or if that doesn't work, then you have to take a time and unscrew it, check the screen, make sure it's unplugged. You know, a lot of people will blow back through it and see if they can get it. If not, you can't get it changed or cleaned or what have you, you need to replace it. Replace it with the same one that came out, okay? We want to have matched precipitation, meaning that I don't want to go just buy a different nozzle and throw in there that's not the same size, because all these nozzles have numbers on them, okay? Basically, it's going to tell you it's going to throw a certain distance. It could be, you know, an 8 foot. It could be an 15 foot, which means it's going to throw 4 feet this way, 4 foot that way. And you can all adjust them by that little tiny screw in the middle, okay? This little tiny screwdriver here will go in that little screw right there to adjust the throw, meaning how far it shoots. You can adjust all those nozzles, and pretty much